Before we start off, I'd like to get this out of the way. I'm not the most well-versed in Metroidvanias. I've played Hollow Knight, I've played Ori, and I've even tried my hand at the games that started the genre, but I'm definitely not an expert on these types of games. It takes a lot for a Metroidvania to really get its hooks into me. I need tight and responsive gameplay, a satisfying and well-paced progression loop, and enough challenge to make it interesting, but not too much to make me viscerally angry. I'm very picky when it comes to games that try to ramp up the difficulty, which is something I find to be common in Metroidvanias. This is the reason I bounce off almost every Souls-like game I start. When it comes to difficulty in games, I'm not allergic to challenge, but it needs to be extremely well-tuned and balanced so that I rarely feel like the game is screwing me over. I also need the systems to be extremely consistent and responsive for the same reason. The reason I've spent the beginning portion of this review yapping my brain away is to emphasize this point. It's rare that I get into a Metroidvania. Due to the blocked-off progression and level design and weird difficulty spikes and tuning, I usually bounce from every Metroidvania I start. However, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a very special video game that proves to be an excellent exception to that general pattern. Prior to The Lost Crown, I'd never played a Prince of Persia game. Not in any meaningful capacity, at least. So when I saw the reveal of it last summer, I wasn't too excited. Take a franchise I don't care about and put it into a genre I generally stay away from, and you have a recipe to instantly get me to check out from whatever you're saying about your game. But when I saw it was set to release in January, I made the decision to jump in and review it for you guys. And there's two reasons for that. One, there's nothing else out right now, so this gives me something to talk about. And two, the majority of people covering this game probably have some fondness for the genre. So I think I have a unique perspective as someone who doesn't usually enjoy these types of games that may be of value to some of you out there. So, how did I feel about Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown? Well, let's dive into it. But before we do, let's dive into a message from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is you guys. Through support on Patreon and YouTube memberships, you guys make it possible for me to do these videos. Without the support on those platforms, this video would not be possible. Through supporting me with memberships or Patreon, you can get access to exclusive polls, live streams, and early access to all non-embargoed videos. If that sounds good to you, head on over there and support me in any capacity you can. It's a win for both of us. You get more stuff, and I get to keep doing what I love. All of your support means the world. If you can't support financially, you can still help the channel by sharing and liking this video, subscribing, and going over to Twitter and following me there. You can also join our free community Discord if you'd like to talk games, movies, music, and more. The links are down below. Thanks again. Now let's get back to the review. I'm going to start this review by discussing the story, because honestly, it's the only real weak link in this package and there isn't a ton to discuss, so I'd like to just get it out of the way. The Lost Crown opens with the player character Sargon winning a battle with one of the main antagonist forces of Persia. After this battle, Sargon returns to the Persian palace with his crew of mercenaries, hoping to wine and dine and celebrate their victory. But instead, the Persian prince Hassan is captured by Anahita, Sargon's mentor. After this, the mercenaries chase after Anahita and track her down to Mount Koth, a spooky mystical mountain palace, before splitting up and searching for Anahita and the prince separately. I actually quite liked the setup for this adventure. I think playing into old school politics and basing things in some realistic version of history is cool. I also liked the mystery angle of it. Anahita, who has always been incredibly loyal to the crown, suddenly decides to kidnap the kingdom's only prince without any clear motive. I also really liked the introduction we are given to Sargon and his band of mercenaries. They all have distinct personalities and motivations that make them interesting to interact with. However, after an excellent setup and introduction to our core cast, things start to fall apart. For starters, the plot of this game is thinner than a mint cookie you buy from a Girl Scout. While at first the characters start off as intriguing and mysterious, the writing quickly makes it clear that there is nothing beyond that initial intrigue. Each character in this game can be broken down to one basic character trait with virtually no evolution or development in sight. The characters don't fundamentally change at any point throughout the story. One could make the argument that Sargon changes as a result of the events toward the end of the game, but I think you would be hard-pressed to make that argument stick. There's no development, no evolving themes, no twists or turns. What you see is what you get. And it's not like they weren't trying. Around the end of Act 1, there was an attempted plot twist where someone is revealed to have been the secret villain the whole time. But it was so half-baked and kind of out of nowhere that it didn't have any sort of subversive effect. If a good video game story is paced like a car ride with progression that moves forward smoothly towards an end goal and ups and downs to keep things interesting, The Lost Crown is a roller coaster. Hurtling forward at top speed, blowing through things because they don't think you care. And that's sad to me. I wish we were past this type of narrative in a video game where it just feels like an afterthought, and it truly does feel like an afterthought. Characters make decisions to service the plot and nothing else. There's no dynamics to their morality or their thought processes. They just go from point A to B to C, moving through the motions, trying to get to the end. But though the characters are rushing to the end of the story, thanks to excellent gameplay, a giant map, tons of side content, and more, I'm confident that you won't be rushing to the end of anything. Discussing the gameplay suite of The Lost Crown is a daunting task, considering how many different facets of it there are. For the sake of comprehension, I'm going to break it down into 3 core sections: abilities, traversal, and combat. Let's start with abilities. The ability set in The Lost Crown is awesome. There are 6 core abilities that are required to complete the game and are attained through main story progression. But, on top of that, there are 2 other ability systems working in the background. There's Athra moves, which are basically like ultimates. During combat, you attain Athra by successfully attacking and parrying without taking damage. This Athra is tracked in a bar on the bottom right of your screen. Once you have a certain amount, you can channel that Athra into a powerful move, dealing devastating damage to the enemy. The other ability system is the amulet system. Throughout the game, you collect little amulets that each do different things. For instance, one amulet I had let me recover health after a successful parry. Another showed me the enemy's health bar. These amulets essentially serve as passive abilities that influence the way you interact with the world. While not the most complex or customizable system in the world, it's just enough to keep player choice meaningful without being overwhelming. This is important in all games, and I think this is a really interesting way to put meaningful player choice into a Metroidvania. I'm so sick of the default approach to player customization being skill trees. It feels like every single game that gets released these days has a skill tree, so the amulet system here is a very nice change of pace. Overall, all 3 of the ability systems, core abilities, Athra, and amulets, serve to make combat and traversal a very satisfying and rewarding experience. Speaking of traversal, let's talk about it. Traversal and exploration in any Metroidvania is a very delicate and difficult tightrope walk. From a design perspective, it's incredibly hard to find a good pace in which to dole out resources, upgrades, and new abilities that allow you to access new parts of the map. The Lost Crown, however, dances through this difficulty with such ease that you'd think the devs had some thorough acrobatics training. There are a few core pillars of traversal that make it an absolute breeze. The first is the memories system. This is basically a photo mode that marks a location where you took a certain photo on the map. The photo itself also becomes visible once you hover over it on the map. This is such a no-brainer concept for a Metroidvania that I'm a bit shocked you don't see it way more often. Sure, this isn't the first game to do it, but it's done so well here that from now on, when I play any other Metroidvania, I'll be very annoyed that I don't have it. So, if you're a dev making a Metroidvania right now, please include something like this. Another thing that aids the traversal experience is free and simple fast travel. Now, backtracking is an essential part of a Metroidvania, so having consequence-free fast travel goes a bit against the genre. However, the map of The Lost Crown is huge. It's one of the bigger Metroidvanias I've seen. I also think the balance of it is just right. The altars where you can fast travel from are dispersed across the map just infrequently enough to still require the player to revisit older areas with their new abilities and see what new secrets they can discover. The fast travel points are also deliberately placed for that purpose. Often in the adjoining rooms of a fast travel spot are hidden nooks and crannies that can only be accessed with abilities unlocked in the late game. What this means is that though you may unlock a fast travel point early on, just because you can fast travel there doesn't mean you'll miss out on important secrets. There's still plenty to be found even with fast travel. Also, the memory feature I mentioned earlier will make it so that you never forget where a certain blocked path was. One criticism I've seen of fast travel in these types of games is that it's used as a crutch for poor level design. The backbone of any game in the Metroidvania genre is its level design and paths that lead back into each other. But sometimes you'll see developers use fast travel as a clutch to hide bad level design. I don't think that's the case here. Even with fast travel, the map is huge, so smart level design is still necessary, and I'm happy to say that this game has a surplus of areas that lead back into each other in smart and clever ways, with shortcuts that will make your mind stutter as you marvel in awe at the brainpower it took to craft them. The last part of traversal I want to discuss is the puzzles, both logical and environmental. This game has a lot of puzzles. Let's start by discussing the logic-based ones. Throughout my 18 hours with The Lost Crown, I was greeted by a bevy of diverse logical puzzles that really made me think. There were so many unique types and formats for these puzzles that I lost track. I mean, it's truly remarkable how many fresh ideas are on display here. A developer could take just one of the puzzle types on display and format their entire Metroidvania game around just that one type of puzzle. The sheer quantity of ideas here is almost unmatched. I'm reminded a bit of Mario Wonder in the way ideas were just used and discarded before moving on to the next one. There's a particular set of puzzles towards the middle of the game where you basically go through the same environment 3 different times on a time limit, and you must manipulate the environment to achieve a set task. For instance, on your first run, you may have to stand on a switch to activate a moving platform. On the second run, you may have to activate a different switch, and then on your third run, you will run through the environment with the aid of the platforms you activated on your first 2 runs to reach the end goal. These puzzles were a real problem-solving highlight, and they made me feel like I had the biggest brain on the planet. The logic puzzles aren't the only puzzles in the game, though. There are also the environmental puzzles. These puzzles really take off in the second half of the game once you have most of the core abilities unlocked. These puzzles force you to use quick decision-making to figure out which combination of abilities will get you past the environmental hazards in your way. Sometimes it's self-explanatory, other times it's not. This was probably my favorite aspect of the game. This is something that any Metroidvania worth its weight should excel in. After all, what's the point of unlocking a bunch of cool and meaningful abilities if you aren't able to flex your mastery of them? By the end of the game, I was confidently double jumping, dashing, and teleporting past all these obstacles with ease and was truly living the power fantasy that these games try to promise. And that's a high bar to clear. Oftentimes with Metroidvanias, I find that I either get overwhelmed by the abilities at my disposal and lose track of which ones I'm supposed to use for certain tasks, or I get incredibly bored at the game making me use the same ability for virtually every puzzle until I unlock the next one and the cycle repeats. I think the dev team over at Ubisoft really found that Goldilocks happy medium here. The last element of the gameplay I'd like to discuss is the combat. The Lost Crown has combat that puts many other side-scrollers to shame. Is it perfect? No. But it's among the best I've seen in this genre, and that's definitely, in part, thanks to its excellent attack evasion system. The Lost Crown uses a color-based alert system that you've seen in countless games over the past few years. Any attack without a color can be dodged or parried, any attack with a yellow flash must be parried, and any with a red flash must be dodged. This is nothing new. However, there are so many enemy types and attack patterns that even after nearly 20 hours spent in the game, I'm still not fully used to all of them. Combat is a challenge, through and through. It constantly forces you to reassess and reevaluate what the correct procedure is for any given encounter. Encounters and the way you play them changes drastically based on the smallest of variables, such as platform size or the number of enemies on screen. Rather than being just a run-of-the-mill hack-and-slash side-scroller, The Lost Crown features a deeply layered and rewarding combat system that offers a worthwhile challenge on any difficulty. The combat gallery on display here is just incredible and will be heralded as one of the best playing modern Metroidvanias. I'm certain of that. And that's not even mentioning the boss fights. The boss encounters in The Lost Crown are some of the best in the genre. They're tanky, ferocious, and annoying, but damn if it doesn't feel satisfying every time you take one down after an hour of trial and error. The bosses themselves feel a bit like the bosses from Bloodborne. Now, these games are incredibly different, and I'm by no means trying to compare this game to Bloodborne, but specifically in the way boss encounters feel, it's the closest parallel I can draw. It's a constant game of dodge, parry, dodge, attack. The timing of these maneuvers must be precise and decisive as well. There's no amount of button spamming that will let you disrespect the enemy unless you're on the easiest difficulty. And even then, you're still required to be alert. They also have incredible design just from a visual perspective. They look menacing, their animations are smooth, and the attack signal window is short but fair. The boss encounters in this game are a highlight in an already incredible overall package. The last thing I want to discuss before we wrap it up are the visuals and the music. Let's start with the former before addressing the latter. The visuals of The Lost Crown are quite nice. The game implements a simplistic cel-shaded art style that looks very good from a distance, but upon further examination leaves a bit to be desired. For much of the game, it looks great. Whenever you're leaping through environments or fighting enemies, the art looks great. There's tons of different biomes and environments to keep the color palette refreshing and the environments unique. However, when the game breaks into a cutscene and you really get to look at everything up close, it leaves just a little to be desired. Even at 4K max settings on my home gaming PC, the game just looks very simple during these close-up segments. Also, this is a note for PC players. I had some performance hiccups and stutters on every single setup I tried. Nothing game-breaking, but there's definitely some minor optimization issues with this port. I feel the same way about the music that I do about the visuals. While quite good, I won't be rushing out to buy the vinyl for this game anytime soon. I think the word I would use for it is adequate. That sounds harsher than I mean it, but it's true. There's nothing exceptional about the score to this game in my eyes. It exists largely within the sound of Middle Eastern music with a dash of classical film score stylings thrown in for good measure. The masters are good, the mixes are good, there's just not much originality or character to the compositions. It's not distracting, but it's also not memorable. It's perfectly sufficient, but nothing to write home about. In closing, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is an excellent Metroidvania. Where it counts, the game succeeds in almost everything it sets out to do. The Metroidvania aspects of the game, such as level design, puzzles, traversal, and combat, are done to a level here that is truly remarkable and will be remembered and revered for many years to come. I sincerely hope this game does well for Ubisoft, because it would be an absolute shame to let this formula die. However, despite some best-in-class aspects of the game, a bland story and an unmemorable visual and auditory gallery hold The Lost Crown back from being the masterpiece that it could have been. If you're someone who likes Metroidvanias, I implore you to go buy and play this game right now. You will have an exceptional time. Even if you don't generally like them, I think this is a game that could bridge you into the genre. It's approachable with tons of tutorials and difficulty tweaking so you can play it your way. I really hope we get another one of these games that builds upon the remarkable foundation laid out here. I'm going to give Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown a 3 out of 4. It's only January, and the first Game of the Year contender has already released. If this year keeps up like this, 2024 might be even better than 2023. Once again, thank you so much to our lovely Patreon supporters and YouTube members. If you liked this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what you think about The Lost Crown, this review, and more. Go follow me on Twitter, the link is down below, and hit that bell to be notified of any new uploads. As always, I'm Michael Lynch. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.